Hello again, Year 10. We are going to be looking at the Bringing Them Home report today. So, the Bringing Them Home report. Essentially, that was the name given to the final report of the National Inquiry into the separation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families, conducted by the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission, which is now called the Australian Human Rights Commission. So we looked a little bit at the Australian Human Rights Commission at the start of the topic, so you should know a little bit about that already. But essentially, it was established by the Attorney General in 1995, this national inquiry. So over 2 years, the inquiry took oral and written testimonies from over 500 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia. They also interviewed people from Indigenous organisations, foster parents, often white ones, state and territory government representatives, church representatives, government, non-government agencies, former mission and government employees, individual members of the community, a whole huge range of people. The report ended up being just shy of 700 pages worth and was tabled in Parliament in May 1997. All these public testimonies resulted in 54 recommendations to support the healing and reconciliation for stolen generations, their families, and the Australian public more broadly as well. So, the calling of the National Inquiry and then the release of the subsequent Bringing Them Home report raised awareness for the Australian public of the historical policies of forced removal, assimilation, that kind of thing, as well as all the ongoing impacts of that. The response of many Australians was shock and absolute horror. They had no idea of so many of the horrible atrocities that had occurred right here in our own country. While the government was pretty slow to respond, the public was not. And Mick Dodson, who was the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, said at the time, "In the last few weeks, we've seen a most extraordinary turn of events. Day after day, and now week after week, the newspapers and airwaves have been jammed with talk about our families and our children. Day after day, the letter pages are filled with the reactions of ordinary Australians, horrified at the truths they never knew. Never before have so many Australians turned their attention to our families. Never before has Australia really known or really cared about our children. Children taken from their mother's arms, taken from their culture." So for many people removed from their families as children, the National Inquiry provided the very first opportunity they ever had to tell their stories and to speak out and have their pain publicly acknowledged as well. So it was pretty brave when you think about it. In particular, many spoke of the significance of having their stories heard by an official government body. For many people, it was an important step of their healing journey, and finally they were able to, almost have a weight lifted off their shoulders just being able to speak about it. It was a lasting impact. Sir William Deane, who was the Governor General of Australia, put in a submission to the National Inquiry as well. He said, "The present plight in terms of health, employment, education, living conditions and self-esteem of so many Aborigines must be acknowledged as largely flowing from what happened in the past. The dispossession, the destruction of hunting fields, the devastation of lives were all related. The new diseases, the alcohol, and the new pressures of living were all introduced. True acknowledgement cannot stop short of recognition of the extent of which present disadvantage flows from past injustice and oppression." So, unpacking that quote a little bit, basically what Sir William Deane, the Governor General of Australia, is saying there is that all these things that we are noticing now, and that are still impacting on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders today, is a result of, first of all, when we first landed in Australia, Europeans first landed in Australia, but right through till, through the stolen generation until now. A lot of it is the impact of the injustices that they were served many years ago, and also recently as well. We've got to keep these things in mind. It wasn't that long ago. So, although it's been almost 30 years since 20, 30 years since the report was published, bringing them home still remains extremely significant today. Many of the report's recommendations have still not been implemented. Members of the stolen generation and their families continue to be affected by the trauma caused by forced removal. And Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are still being removed from their families today at a very high rate. I think that's something that we definitely shouldn't forget, that while maybe it's more justified today, it's still a stripping of their culture, and that must be incredibly difficult for them. The traumatic experiences of being forcibly removed from their families remain with members of the stolen generation. Most Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been affected by the stolen generation. It's estimated that anywhere between 1 in 10 to 1 in 3 people and their communities and families have been affected by the stolen generation. It's an incredibly far-reaching event, and considering how important kinship and family and community is to the Indigenous way of life, it's little wonder. The resulting trauma has been passed down to children and to grandchildren, contributing to many of the issues faced by Indigenous communities today, including family violence, substance abuse, self-harm, these kinds of things. These lasting impacts are well documented by the National Inquiry, as were the effects on parenting. Most forcibly removed children were denied the experience of ever being parented or at least cared for by a person to whom they were attached. This is the very experience people rely on to become effective and successful parents themselves.
The children away.
They can't leave us like this. And the pain of talking of it all and bringing it out, we do, because we need people to see where we are and where we're coming from.
And even though I was taken away from my land, I never forget that because of they stole my human rights and they stole my Aboriginal freedom rights. And there was no justice at that time. They never told me.
Well, living in all these different places with different people, I kept wondering about my mother, but I couldn't do anything about it. I had no choice. I just used to cry, to myself, cry all the time, and wanted to know who I was, where I come from. I couldn't do nothing about it. I had no control over my life. Everything was set, it was planned. I couldn't ask if I can go with this family for holidays. It had to be accepted by the welfare or by the missionaries. I couldn't have any say. I had to go where they told me to go, even if I didn't like it, and I'd just cry.
As a 12-year-old, I accidentally broke a plate glass window by throwing a ball through it, as any boys would do. And for my punishment, I had to bend over and take my trousers off and bend over, and there I received 10 lashings of the stock whip.
They hit you with a stock whip?
Oh yes, which left an indelible imprint upon my memory. And of course I wasn't able to sit down for 3 months.
And how is the state of your self-esteem when you look in the mirror and you cry? What are your hopes like when you can only dream of what a normal, healthy family life would be like? Who should I blame? I was institutionalised from the ages 6 to 9, and then again from 14 to 18, when I was no longer a ward of the state. I had no contact with my mother. I only had a picture image of her in my mind. What sense of kindness could this kind of cruelty realise?
I can't... It's just too hard to think that all those people who have given so much, who have opened themselves with such honour and respect and courage over the last 2 years to the forums for the National Inquiry, for the government not to listen.
Children removed were denied their language and their culture.
Can't you realise the hurt that is deep within me?
Some of the different recommendations from the report include adequate funding of appropriate Indigenous agencies, the establishment of a working party to develop a process for the implementation of the inquiry's recommendations, so someone to actually do the job and make sure that the job is being done, that all those recommendations being implemented, that an acknowledgement and an apology be made, along with a guarantee against repetition, especially by Australian governments, any parliaments in Australia, state or federal, churches and other non-government agencies that played a part. Compensation to be paid to those who suffered from the removal policy, including families. Arrangement of a National Sorry Day, and that a substantial and compulsory module of the history and continuing effects of forcible removal is implemented into the Australian curriculum, which clearly it is because we are learning about it. These are just some of the different recommendations that were given, definitely not all, and it is an exhaustive list, but these are some of the really important initial ones that are definitely things that can be implemented, and some of them that have been implemented, like the Sorry Day, school curriculum, and the National Sorry Day as well.
Children of the Melville Island Mission Station arrive in Melbourne, where they await transfer to a country home. A little bewildered by it all at first, their shyness is soon conquered, and they're just happy kids on a corroboree.
We estimate that it was at least 1 in 10 children, but anything up to 1 in 3 children were actually removed. But the more telling point is that experienced people have assured us that there is probably not one Aboriginal community, not one Aboriginal family or community in Australia today that has not been scarred by the separation policy. If not in this generation, then in former generations. And the truth is, as we've learnt and found, that the sad effects of separation passed on from generation to generation, because the loss of parenting skills by reason of being brought up in an institution was transferred to the next generation, because that generation grew up without their parents having learnt how to be good mothers.
Mother very soon realised that she was indeed amongst friends, people who really cared for her and for her baby. The Aborigine has become a vanishing race, except on the mission station.
I didn't even know about the whole policy of assimilation till 1990. It was like a massive wave of information hit me, and not only did I find out about myself, but I also found out about the history of Aboriginal people, which was a terrible shock, because I had never known that people took children away. I never knew about the history of Black Australia, and most of all, I found out that was me.
When Julie Lavelle was taken from her mother in Wilcannia, she was only 3 weeks old. She was brought up by good people. Her new parents in Sydney, they were really wealthy. Julie was supposed to be what assimilation is all about.
And so there would be people who would say to me, if she'd been raised in Wilcannia, she'd be just like them, with all that despair and hopelessness. And look at her now, she's well educated, she's bright and articulate, and has all those things that white society offered me. Yes, I do have all those things, and that's okay. But there's no way that that was ever a trade-off. For not having known my mother, I have no memory of her, of not having my own identity, of not knowing for 32 years of my life that I had biological brothers and sisters. There is no way that that could ever be a trade-off.
In 1990, when the secret law about adoption changed, Julie tried to find her birth mother.
My search had started out, I had a kind of a tunnel vision about it all. I wanted to find my mother. I wanted to say to her what I imagine any mother who'd lost a child is that, were they well looked after? Did somebody care? Did somebody love them? Because I'm a parent now, and I know if my children had taken, there wouldn't be a day that I didn't think about them or wonder how they went. And I wanted to tell her and to ease her, to say that it was okay. I had a good home, loving parents, and I made it. Unfortunately, that was never to be. And when I found out that she had passed away, and it seemed so soon, so 3 years, because I'd wanted her to do so long, and it just took so long to get to doing it. And I remember thinking, part of me was just sobbing and crying, because part of me was saying, I've lost my mum, and she's gone, and it's finished. And the other part of me was saying, why am I crying? I never met this woman. How can I feel a loss of someone I've never known? How can I feel so emotional about someone I'd never met? And yet, I'd lost my mum. And it was just devastating. And will always be with me. And it goes on. My children have lost their grandmother. Although the funny thing is that my daughter's name is Heather, and she was born in 1987, the same year that my mother had died. And as I said, it wasn't until 1990 that I knew all this, and I found out my mother's name was Heather. And so, somehow, some way, my daughter bears her birth grandmother's name. And so, in that I felt that I hadn't lost it all, that there was something left.
We're family people. Everything that we do concerns family. And when there's a split in the family, that's when it's broken, that's when you hear the cry of our heart, because that's who we are. We're family people. Everything revolves around family. Everything we do concerns our family. Close family, extended family. That's it. You know, and when you split the family, when you take like the children from their parents, take the fathers from the family, that's when you get, you know, that's when the cry of the heart comes out. And that's why I wrote the song, because I could feel the cry of the heart of all those families, all those Aboriginal families that have been split and broken. You know, a brother over here, a sister over there, a mother over there. And that's why I wrote it. You know, we're family people. We're family-oriented people.
Can't you realize the hurt that is deep within me? You thought that you were doing what was best for me when you took me away from my mother's breast into an environment foreign and unreal. And I cry nights of loneliness, more than I can bear. I'm not the person that you see, and I cry for the things that might have been. Not sure of who I am, I'm not the person I should be. Can't you realize the hurt that is deep within me? You thought that you were doing what was best for me when you took me away from my mother's breast into an environment foreign and unreal. And I cry nights of loneliness, more than I can bear. I'm not the person that you see, and I cry for the things that might have been. Not sure of who I am, I'm not the person I should be. Doesn't anyone care? I cry nights of loneliness. Doesn't anyone care? I cry nights of loneliness. Doesn't anyone care? I cry nights of loneliness. Doesn't anyone care?